Welcome to this episode of Manufacturing Mavericks. I'm your host, Greg McHale. As the founder of Datanomix, I've had the privilege of visiting hundreds of shops all across the country. And in those visits, I've met some of the most incredible and innovative people in this industry. Our goal with the Manufacturing Mavericks podcast is to highlight those leaders, those mavericks of manufacturing who are innovating not just with technology, but with culture, people, and process too, so we can all learn not just what they do, but why they do it. We'll dig into what got them into manufacturing, what fires them up to go to work every single day and pour their blood, sweat, and tears into keeping the manufacturing dream alive in our country. With that, I'm honored to introduce today's manufacturing maverick, Paul Van Metre. Welcome to the show, Paul. How are you doing today?
I am great, Greg, and I'm so honored to be here. Thanks to you so much. I'm looking forward to our talk.
Paul, I have been looking forward to this episode for quite some time. I mean, your impact on the industry, your wisdom, your counsel, your presence on LinkedIn, and just what you do for the manufacturing industry. I know that there are a lot of folks who are interested in learning as much from you as they can. I'm first in line on that today, and the great news is I've got you on the other side of a microphone. So this is going to be fantastic, Paul.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to your podcasts, and you're a fantastic host and interviewer. So I knew this was going to be just a blast.
All right. Well, we'll try to keep that standard going as we have you on here today, Paul. So I think one of the most fascinating things about you and about ProShop is it's so obvious to me when I see your personal presence, your professional presence or ProShop's presence on LinkedIn, that you guys are 100% about community and having the back of manufacturers and having the back of your customers and non-customers, just anyone who's trying to solve a problem in manufacturing. And obviously what's behind that is a deep and authentic connection to the manufacturing space, technology, and people. So I would love to learn, as I know you pretty well. We've done a lot of events together, but I don't think I've heard the genesis story of Paul falling in love with manufacturing. So why don't we start right there?
Thank you, Greg, for all those really kind words. My and our passion for manufacturing is so deep, and it seems to get deeper every year. So I got the bug through cars. So first of all, for all of my motorheads out there, my stepdad loved cars. I just got the bug when I was a teenager and had all sorts of old cars that I would tinker on and work on. And I thought I was going to go into automotive engineering. So I actually started with a mechanical engineering program at Boston University. And then during that freshman year on Christmas break, I came home. I grew up in New Jersey. I came home for the Christmas holiday, and my mom had kept some of my car magazines. And I'm laying on the couch. And so this engineering program was okay, but it was pretty dry. It was very theoretical. There was huge lecture halls with hundreds of students. And I was used to, tinkering on my car on the weekend. And I'm like, this just isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And I read a magazine article about this tiny little program out in Western Washington, couldn't be further from New Jersey, called the Vehicle Research Institute. And they design and build cars. And your college degree is vehicle design and building cars. And I was like, are you kidding me? This exists in the world? Like, I have to go do this. So right from the couch, I called to my mom. I'm like, Mom, I'm leaving BU and I'm moving across to Washington to go to this little school. And she's like, that's nice, honey. My parents were always so supportive. Anyway, I came out here, and actually I just posted on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago a picture of me standing in front of an old American lathe, big, like 25 horsepower lathe from probably like the 40s or 50s, and just burning chips. And I have a big piece of plexiglass in front of my face to try to keep the hot chips out of my face. But that is when I fell in love with manufacturing. We had CNC machines, we had manual equipment, we had welders, and I basically got really deep into the Formula SAE program that they did at this vehicle research, Western Washington University, for those that want to look it up. The program unfortunately no longer exists, but it was going for a good 40 plus years or so. And probably the best part of this whole story is on my first class, first period, first day, I met Kelsey Highcoop, my business partner and dear friend. Yeah, we were paired up as lab partners. And we have been, and that was in 1993. So it is more than 30 years later. And we have been with each other every step of the way, from building those cars and working literally 120 hours a week, sleeping in the lab, sleeping in old cars from the previous years to get up after 4 hours and just go at it again, trying to build these cars. And yeah, so that's where the bug originally started.
Paul, that opens so many different questions for me that I almost don't know where to begin. So first of all, I mean, Boston University, no joke of a school, right? Top tier. You were a freshman at the time that you made that decision?
I was. Yep. I was a freshman. Yeah.
And it was literally that obvious to you. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to this school on the East Coast, but I'm 6 months in, I'm not getting what I want. And you just knew that you were being called on a deep level to go do something different. I mean, that's at 18, 19 years old.
In an instant. Yeah. It didn't take me. Wow. I mean, literally, I called to my mom from the couch. I'm like, Mom, I'm leaving BU and I'm moving to Washington State. I have something I got to go do.
Not even a blink.
No. I came sight unseen, basically. Found a little apartment through some ad. The internet wasn't a thing back then. And so through a newspaper or something, I forget exactly how I found this, found a little apartment and moved out. And that was it. I was here.
That feels so wildly improbable that magazine still happens to be there. Mom didn't throw it out. So it's still sitting there.
Yeah. I mean, what are the chances? Interestingly enough, that article, it was in Automobile Magazine, and it brought an incredible group of people that next year that had seen that article. And then Kelsey, who, is my business partner through ProCNC, the machine shop, and through ProShop today, the guy that started and founded the program, Dr. Mike Seal, was Kelsey's uncle. And that's why Kelsey was there, because he grew up with his uncle and tinkering on cars and got the bug himself. And so, yeah, that's why he was there.
Wow. So one of the other questions you made me think of, what's the most comfortable old car to sleep in?
Well, I think the picture I posted, which is the only one I have of me sleeping, was a Viking 22, which was a Formula SAE car, and that is not at all comfortable.
That does, I don't think. Yeah,
probably
think so.
Some of the old like Viking 6 and 7, and some of those had a very reclined position because they were kind of swoopy and super high mileage kind of cars. And so yeah, those were probably and they had closing doors. So that, a little cocoon to sleep and get, 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep before you go at it the next day.
So you get out there, Kelsey, who becomes ultimately your lifelong business partner. You meet on day one as lab partners. That's your first exposure to CNC machining at that point?
Yes, I'd never seen didn't even know what CNCs were. And walked into that lab, and they had, a couple different manual lathes, some manual mills. They had a Haas VF2 and a VF4. And then next to our lab was another machine shop for the machining, classes. And they had an old Mazak, mill turn lathe, and a VF2 as well. And actually, no, they got the VF2 while I was at school. The first thing they had was just this little like open bed. Oh gosh, it's going to kill me. Little open bed, like NC style 2.5 axis lathe or 2.5 axis mill. The machining instructor would have us, it was a brilliant concept. He would have us make tool holders to use for machining. So like we would make a milling holder, like a little, insert indexable mill with little pockets for the triangular inserts. But that was the project. We'd start by turning a blank, and then we'd put that turn blank into a 4th axis and mill the little pockets. And then we'd use those cutters to do other machining. So it was kind of a self-perpetuating curriculum. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Clyde Hackler was his name, the machining instructor. Anyway, great memories from that time.
Awesome. So you go through the program, and how about right after college? Did you jump right into your own shop, or what did you end up doing?
Yeah. So Kelsey was actually, when we met, he was a freshman and I was a sophomore, because I did finish out finished out my freshman year, and then I transferred in as a sophomore. But he was actually a year behind me. But we knew, me and him and a few other guys from the Formula team. There was actually 6 of us, if you believe it. We actually wanted to start a small niche car company. So we wanted to have a company that made these. We came up with this cool design that was very similar to the Formula SAE cars we built that were machined, largely machine components with some carbon fiber structural components. But we didn't have any money. We had no money. So Kelsey's older brother, Darcy, actually took out a second mortgage on his house. And we decided that we would just start a machine shop because a machine shop would have all the same equipment, processes, people, and infrastructure that we'd need to start building some prototype, like a prototype car, and then go out and find some real investors with deep pockets. It was so incredibly naive because we thought, we were maybe 22, 23 years old. We thought that in only a couple of years after starting a machine shop, we would have enough free time and free cash flow to build prototypes on the evenings and weekends and have all the money to buy all the parts and components to build a prototype and then go, try to pitch this to some investors. Little did we realize that the machining business is the hardest business in the world. It is the most complicated, the most cash intensive, the most slim margins, with a million things that can go wrong, and everything has to go right to make your quoted margin on a job. And even just learning how to quote was an exercise. But after 2 years, we didn't have the energy or the cash flow to, build a prototype. So we just kept plugging away at our shop. And, like I said, it's not what we originally envisioned long term, but we ended up with a much bigger shop than we ever conceived of when we ultimately sold it. But we just sort of went with the flow and just continued to learn and fall deeper in love with machining and with manufacturing.
So you started out with the second mortgage way of financing a business, which is always so fascinating, right? When people put everything they have on the line to get something off the ground. And how many machines did you start with? What kind of equipment did you start with? What kind of work were you trying to do to make ends meet?
Yeah, we started with a VF4. It was a new one. And then we bought a used manual mill and lathe and started with a 2,000 square foot little, warehouse space near Seattle. We didn't know anybody, didn't have any industry connections, except for two of our professors from Western had gone off into industry while we were students there. One of them started a composites company, and another one went to work in Boeing in an R&D capacity. And so some of our first jobs were for those two ex-professors. One was a snowshoe mold for a composite snowshoe. And I remember quoting $5,000 for that two-piece mold and thinking that was just a wild sum of money that was, how could they possibly say yes to $5,000? And, it realistically should have been 15,000, not 5, but we learned a lot. And we took the picture of that, put it on our first little brochure we made. We were very proud of it. And then for the professor that went to Boeing, I remember we made this chain. It was literally a chain of 20 or 30 links of 70, 75 billet, sort of with clevis and a blade. And then they would piece together with precision pins. And I forget what the chain was for, but it was for some big machine in Boeing. And then we just, started knocking on doors, literally looking up the business journal and looking for companies or the yellow pages or the Thomas book, and just looking for companies that might be involved with manufacturing. And, I could barely grow a mustache back then. I was, 23 or so, and it was hard to, have buyers and engineers take us seriously. But we kept at it, and our next machine was a VF2. And then we bought a Nakamura Tomei lathe with live tooling, which was used. And I think still to this day is running in that shop. Incredible precision machine. Yeah. And that was the beginning, ProCNC.
So you had to hustle in the pre-internet era, which also growing up in the pre-internet era. And, I always say to people, if you wanted to speak to a girl and you didn't have to talk to her dad on the phone, you don't understand the pre-internet era.
Yes.
You're calling for my daughter? What is it who are you? Why do I want to let you speak to her?
Yeah.
You can't just go direct to the source. So you learned how to hustle in the pre-internet era. Obviously now it's gotten a million times easier in some respects, more complicated, maybe more depersonalized in some respects. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, there's some on various forums and platforms. I hear people today, shop owners of small shops saying, how do I find work? How do I find customers? And a lot of the advice is still the same as when I started in the late 90s. Like get a nice shirt with a logo on it. I had a little aluminum briefcase that I had foam in it and I would cut out and put sample parts in it. And then literally go knock on doors, go try to, sit in the lobby of a local aerospace company or a medical device company and say, hey, I'd love to, get 10 minutes with the buyer, because this is still a relationship business. No matter how much technology there is, people are not going to give you business or do business with you unless they feel some kind of personal connection and feel confident that doing business with you is going to benefit them. Right. There's just no two ways about it. So all decisions are made, emotionally, not logically, even though people think there's a lot of logic involved. And there's got to be trust and there's got to be, that sort of authentic connection. I agree the industry is harder than it's ever been before, partly because it is so depersonalized. It's so competitive. There's 17 or 20,000 shops in the US alone. But some of those principles of having human connection are still just so foundational. I was reinforced by that with one of my podcast guests recently, Nathan Bourgeois from Ouroboros Space and Defense, 8-year-old shop, young guy in his probably, I don't know exactly, but probably early 30s. And he just blew me away with his interview. Just, he would go to a conference and just be relentless in just being in the conversation, being in the room, asking to, talk to people, meet with people. It worked. He's now has the client list as like the creme de la creme of space companies. And just that perseverance and understanding the client's problems and how you can solve them and your value statement and making that personal connection wins the day every time.
You just got to want it more than the next guy, right?
The next guy or gal. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. You got to get out there and make it happen. No one's going to do it for you. So Pro CNC, now you mentioned before, ultimately sold the shop. So how long did you have it? How big did you get to? What did you end up specializing in?
Yeah, we had it for 17 years. We got it to about 75 employees on 3 shifts with a little over 30 CNC machines. And we were an ISO and AS certified company for both manufacturing as well as engineering work. So we weren't just a machine shop. And we were quite diversified, but biggest industries ultimately were aerospace and defense. Like I said, we were quite diversified both in our industries as well as our customers individually. We had some really focus on not having any customer be too big. We kind of had our 10% rule or sort of net margin rule. Like if you have a client getting much bigger than your net margin, that's a risky place if they just fell off the face of the earth the next day. And we figured we could weather the storm if any client was less than 10% or so. But there were years where that fluctuated wildly. If we had a customer come on with a huge contract, but then we'd always endeavor to diversify more. Yeah, so we did both prototype machining. We had a dedicated team of like journeyman level prototype machinists that had, Mastercam at their station right in front of their machine. And they just did sort of one piece flow of programming and machining, and incredible craftsmen that could make things like you could give them a model and then in less than an hour, they're making chips, right? I mean, they'd literally program the roughing sequence and just start it going while they program the next tool and like almost, feed one tool at a time into the machine. And then we had our production department and we had, horizontals and verticals and, we had a 3-spindle Toyota pallet system with 25 pallets. Ultimately, we did have a handful of 5-axis machines near the end. And then we had our engineering and assembly department. So they would design and build really complex tooling and machinery and mechanisms. And then we'd machine it in all our various departments. And then they'd test it and assemble it and deliver it. We made really cool things that went onto the production line of the F-35 and lots of other cool, big things you can't share with most people. It was just really fun, but incredibly hard at the same time. Anyone that's run a precision manufacturing company knows there are there's lots of highs, but there's gut-wrenching lows, right? After 9/11, we were days, maybe a week or two away from bankruptcy. At that point, not quite well diversified enough and pretty heavy into aerospace, and they stopped, all the airplane orders stopped pretty cold after 9/11. We had about a dozen people at the time, and we didn't want to lay anyone off because they were our friends and our work family. And so we just kind of kept them on for too long, and to the point of just sort of bleeding all the bank accounts and lines of credit, down to zero. And found an advisor, quite honestly, asked for help. And that guy helped us get weather that through and ultimately build back up to a place of, strength and growth. Yeah, it's the hardest business in the world. I'll go to my grave saying it.
You were literally, so you say days away from bankruptcy. I mean, what was when you're in that situation, what was the rapid response? What started to get you, out of the jam?
I mean, the owners had long since stopped paying themselves, for months in advance, but we had to lay off people. I remember we were having our typical once a month Friday Hawaiian shirt day. And that's the day we announced layoffs.
Oh, no.
I don't think we had a Hawaiian shirt day for a really long time, if ever, after that. But yeah, we laid off, I don't know, maybe half. Like I said, we had about a dozen or so people, maybe 15, and we, probably laid off 6 or 8 people and just really cut back down to the bone and figured out just one day at a time, cash flow and what vendor can we pay and how are we going to make payroll, and just very slowly kind of unburied out of that. And then after that, actually, we had several very good years because a lot of shops, there was some attrition in the industry after that, as there was after 2008-9. But 2008-9 wasn't nearly as bad for us because we had already done it once through a really, hard recession. And we actually only dipped very slightly and came out, doing, triple digit growth after those years. But we made it on the Inc. 5000 5 times. And similarly, the Washington State's 100 fastest growing companies 5 times or 6 times. And also best companies to work for 4 times in the state. So, we put our heart and souls into that business for sure. But one of the biggest things ultimately that we put our heart and souls into was designing this software program that we decided to endeavor on to run the shop with. Because when we started getting to that, dozen, 15 person size, and we went out we already had this, coming out of college and being very computery and all that. We wanted to have a paperless shop floor from day one. Yeah. So we actually it was hilarious because back then, of course, computer monitors were all these big CRTs.
20 pounds. Yeah.
50, 70 pounds. Yeah. Like the 21-inch monitors.
Yeah.
Holy cow, those things were heavy. But yeah, we put a computer next to every machine we bought with a big CRT on it and full, Tower Pentium 3 or Pentium 2, whatever they were back then. And we had this really fancy system of spreadsheets, of Excel workbooks. And Kelsey, my partner, he's not a programmer, but he made a bunch of Visual Basic macros. And so if you would, we would estimate on one sheet, and then if we won that job, we'd click a button and it would spawn some new tabs and fill in information. And we'd have a work order page, and then we'd have an inspection page for the first article in the in process. And then we'd have a page for your cutting tool list, and we'd have a page to put your setup notes. And we had one of those workbooks for every part number, basically. And we'd spawn new tabs for future work orders of the same part. And it was pretty spiffy, but it was, we're constantly saying, hey, can you close that sheet so I can open it, across the shop? And because Google Sheets wasn't a thing, of course, nor was Office 365. So after a while, we're like, God, this is getting tedious, and we literally, took down the Thomas book off the shelf and started leafing through the software section. What, we've heard this term ERP. We don't really know what it means, but there's got to be some companies that have figured out something better than this Excel system that we're using. And we indeed, found the section and had probably half a dozen software companies come and demo for us. And we were really excited for them to come. We were like, okay, we're going to dig in here and show us how you do cutting tool management, show us the first article form, show us, work instructions. And universally, they're like, no, we don't do that. And we're like, wait a minute, you're advertising in like the machine shop's management software section. That's what we do every day. Yeah, but we don't do that. You still need your spreadsheets. We do this other thing. We do inventory. You can make invoices. We're like, are you kidding me? So after half a dozen demos, we were like, okay. And we also and they all said, of course, as well. So yeah, you do it in the office, you make your quote, you turn it into a job, and then you print off your job traveler. And then you attach that with all your other printed pieces of paper. And we're like, are you kidding me? Like, we've been paperless for the last 3 years. Like, we're not going to add paper. And then they also, since we wanted to have it at every computer, every machine, they're like, oh, that's very expensive. You need all these licenses. And it seemed so backwards to us. So we're like, screw all these guys. We're just going to build something that's basically a replacement for our spreadsheets. Because the concept is sound, clearly, but the Excel version isn't going to work for us. So we actually, back into the sort of the family business. Kelsey's uncle was a developer, and we talked to him, and he started, helping us brainstorm. And he's like, you know what, I'm too busy with my regular job, but I know this. My nephew actually is a young kid, and he's a programmer, and he's pretty smart. His name is Matt. And why don't you guys talk to him? So we talked to Matt, and Matt was actually a web developer back in the year 2000. So very, very early in the internet. And we're like, yes, this is the spreadsheet we're trying to replace with, something that we can have open everywhere. And he's like, yeah, web is perfect for that. Now, it wasn't on the internet, but it was a browser-based, web technology application from day one. And he just started building, basically at first, just the replacement for these spreadsheets. And that's what turned into ProShop.
So literally, you designed your own operating system from the inside out for what the business needed to be successful. And you had this view of like, hey, when we grow up someday, we'll go to the software that all the bigger guys use. You get the demos of those, the presentations, and you're like, they're not doing anything that they should be doing. I mean, that's incredible.
Exactly. They seemed so misguided in their design. I mean, they were, in hindsight, they were all clearly, built by accountants and financial people with pretty much zero manufacturing or quality functionality. And it's like, it's important to keep the books clean, don't get me wrong. And you got to be able to do job costing and stuff like that. But the heart and soul of a manufacturing company is the shop floor. Like, you can't make a profit without executing well on the shop floor. And that, and as, have said so many times, because precision manufacturing business is the hardest business in the world, there are a million, not literally, thousands of details that you have to get right for that part to turn out well. And any one of those things being wrong can end up with scrap and lots of extra time. And, having a system and a process to manage that well and make sure you have the very best possible chance of all those thousands of details, all the stars aligning, so you can hit your targets and make your margin and have your scrap rate low and get it on time and have the customer like it, packaged right, and everything that has to come together right. It's really important to get all that stuff right, or else you're not going to have anything for the financial system to calculate, a net margin at the end of the year.
Right. There's no invoice to send.
Exactly. So yeah, just very naively stumbled into, how we thought this software system should operate a business. Yeah, it was just out of complete inexperience and naivety that we decided this is the way we think it should be, and not just buying into, what we were trying to be, people were trying to sell us.
So sort of refusal to accept the kind of default assumptions of the industry. But then also, I mean, was this uncle of Kelsey's the same one connected to the school, or does he have like multiple uncles that are just like massive players in this story?
No. That was, I think it's a sister's husband. So not actually an uncle, but much older, 10, 15 years older or something like that. But Kelsey's family's been very good to us over the years. I guess that's the end story.
That's so fascinating that, those connections were available to you, you come back to the couch, right? And the magazine, and I'm changing schools. And that sets this entire trajectory that you're talking about in motion. I mean, you couldn't draw that up if you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think life is like that. The tiniest little decisions, the tiniest incidental things that happen can absolutely change the entire course of your life. So yeah, if there's anyone out there that's a fan of ProShop, you have my mom to thank. She kept that car magazine.
Yeah. And she didn't tell you, too bad, Paul, you're staying here.
Exactly.
You're not switching schools. What's wrong with you? So you end up building ProShop from that experience. And then, I mean, the shift from growing from zero to even by today's standards, a good size shop, right? 30 machines, 75 employees, 3 shifts. That's a fantastic business. So what then, comes along and whispers to you, hey, instead of doing this shop thing, maybe you should do this software thing. How does that come about?
Yeah, another wonderful part of the story. So one of the earliest customers that we got as a shop was a company in Mill Creek, Washington, just northeast of Seattle, called Self Aero Marine. And they were largely an aerospace OEM. They designed and built hardware and gadgets and other sorts of little things for Boeing and for Bombardier and for, pretty much every airplane out there. So, when you walk into one of those planes, their hardware is all through the galley. They make latches, they make hinges, they make, little cabinets for storing things. They make just all sorts of aerospace hardware. And they became one of our biggest machine shop customers. And they had nice volumes. It was wonderful to, get an order for 1,000, 280 latches, which were these oval latches that we had to surface. And we figured out all sorts of cool ways to fixture them and make them efficiently. But ultimately, the production manager at the time, who ended up being a good friend of ours, and this I just love this story. He's a huge sports guy. Probably his name is Rich Olson, still a dear friend today. And you could not find a more diehard sports guy for Seattle. He was into the Sonics, he was into football, he was into baseball, everything. And he wanted to build a sports court in his backyard. He had a nice big flat backyard, and he told his wife, "I want to build this sports court," because they had. I think I don't know if they had kids quite yet, but he ended up being, have 2 boys, and he coached all of their sports for years. So in the backyard, he wanted to build like this combo, like, basketball and just sports court for whatever kind of sport. And she said to him, "You can build the sports court, but you have to earn the money to build that entirely on top of your regular salary, your regular job. You're not taking a penny of your paycheck and putting it towards that sports court." So he approached us and said, "Hey guys, I could use some extra money on the weekends. Can I come up and work for you guys and just do setups, run machines, whatever?" And we're like, "Absolutely." We were busy. I think they ran a 4-day week maybe. So maybe he even came on Fridays. And so for a couple of years, he came up and worked, just part-time at ProCNC. And, being on the floor, doing setups, running parts, doing inspections, he used ProShop. And at one point he came to us and he's like, "This is amazing software. Like, this is way better than what we run our shop with. Can you tell me the name of the company you bought it from? Because I want to, we want to call them." Yeah. And we're like, "Yeah, so about that, we built it and it's not for sale for sure." Anyway, they, ultimately they asked us, if we would sell it to them, and through a lot of debate and discussion and navel gazing, we were like, "Yeah, maybe we should give it a shot." So in 2008 is when we started. And I think end of 2008 or maybe 2009, they had a product called DBA, which was just this, big database driven ERP system, MRP system. And I just recently got more details on this because I actually interviewed Rich for a new podcast that I'm launching.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's called Manufacturing Transformed. It's going to be real shops, real stories. So that is the ProShop podcast. My other one, Machine Shop Mastery, is decidedly not a ProShop podcast. But anyway, after spending a couple of months of like transferring their database into ours and just getting lots of data, they went live with ProShop, and 3 weeks later turned off their old ERP.
No way. That's not
Yep.
even possible. You can't even do that.
After like 20 years, of data in their old system. And so that gave us the confidence to like, wow, this actually, and it immediately transformed their company. Speaking of that word transform, they had a late order list of jobs that probably, I think you said it was about 10 pages long or so, constantly for years. And every single day they would meet for a couple hours. They had 2 full-time expediters. They had 2 planners that helped plan everything, and very immediately freed up those expediters. They got that late order list of 10 pages long down to like less than a quarter of a page. They dropped their inventory hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they were building tons of WIP and inventory for not the right things at not the right times. Still great company. Boeing loved them, gold supplier, all that kind of stuff. But it was just incredibly challenging for them to try to run and maintain that business. And ProShop, literally in just a few months, just completely transformed it. And then, so that gave us a bunch of confidence. And then they said, the next thing they said, you're such a great supplier and we can see how much this has helped us. Would you sell ProShop to some of our other vendors? And we're like, you mean our direct competitors in the shop space?
Right.
They're like, yeah, those companies, because their quality isn't great. Their communication isn't great. Their deliveries are always late. Their paperwork isn't very great. We had built-in AS9102 forms and all that stuff by that time. And we're like, yeah, okay, we'll try it. So we did it with another shop, probably a 50 person shop. Incredible results as well. And that's when it was clear we have something that seems to resonate, seems to make a difference. Let's sell the shop and let's go full-time into the software business.
That is an unbelievably impressive story. I mean, 3-week ERP projects, I know ProShop can do it today, but the benchmark in the industry today is not measured in weeks for getting a new ERP up and running, let alone, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And so they were about, when we shot in 2015, when we shot a video with them when we were first launching, or early 2016, when we were first launching ProShop to the market, we went and did a testimonial video, and I learned some things that I had never known about their implementation. So at the time, they were about 35 people, and they were doing about $8 million a year in business, which is pretty good, but it's their own product, right? They get a pretty penny for it. Over the next 5, 6 years, but maybe 7 by the time we interviewed them, they had grown to an $18 million company, and they were doing it with 40 people, not 35 people. So they well over doubled with only 5 additional staff. And they said, yeah, if we were still using DBA today, we'd probably need at least 45, if not more people. So they figured we saved them like 10 overhead staff just in the workflows and the things that we did. And that feels pretty good, that to help a company, that much in that meaningful a way. And, and also the part that was when I was sitting there watching them do the interviews, like you could see it on Rich's face, just like how much it meant personally, to them, to him, like how much of a struggle it used to be, how stressful it was to have a 10-page late order list every single day for years. And to get it to the point where he could leave at 3:30 or 4 o'clock and he could go, coach his kids' sports teams and know that the company was doing well and they were on time. And it wasn't, I think he said, barely keeping their head above water, prior to that, just from an operational perspective. And that's the part that just makes me so humble and grateful and excited to help the industry, because having lived it, firsthand, I know how hard it is to run these kinds of businesses. And a lot of shop owners, on every show I'm on, I recommend the E-Myth. The E-Myth Revisited, just an amazing, great book. The E-Myth, have you ever read it yourself, Greg?
I have not, but I'm looking it up right now.
Put on your list. Yep. It's an easy read. It takes only a couple of days. The E-Myth is the entrepreneurial myth. And the entrepreneurial myth is that if you are good at a craft, like you're a tool and die maker, you're a machinist, that you will be good at running a machine shop or a tool and die shop. The fact that you are good at a craft makes no difference in how good you are at running that type of business, because the skill set is totally different, right? You can dial in a vise and, bore a bore down to, 50 millionths, but understanding sales and marketing and HR and scheduling and finance, those are totally different skill sets. And so the myth, which is busted in the book, is that just because you're going to be good at your craft does not mean you're good at running that business. But that's the way most shops start. They're started by people that worked for someone else or decided one day they were going to start or buy or something, a business like this. And kind of like us being very naive at the beginning, didn't realize just how brutally hard it can be. That being said, there's lots of successful ones. You can learn to be good at those things, but having good tools to do that helps immensely, right? If you can tame the chaos, if you can have better systems, better processes. And so the real thrust of that book actually is that if you can design and build a prototype of a franchise model business, just like a McDonald's, if your business can run as if it was a prototype of a franchise, even though you're only ever going to have one location, that is the most consistent, profitable, process-driven way to run a business, which is easier to, not work in the business every day. You can work on the business. You can go on vacation. You can have a succession plan. You can have more consistent profits if you have standardized operating model to run that business. And so those principles just got drilled into our head at the early, like we read that book in the early 2000s. And that and a couple others were just so impactful to us about how to build ultimately an operating system that helps run this hardest type of business in the world.
So I definitely already clicked it, add to cart. I'm gonna have that one in the not too distant future, Paul. I deeply appreciate that. But really what it sounds like you're saying is ProShop and really ProShop customers in a way have become franchises of ProCNC because of the system you built and the best practices you put together. Ultimately, what you licensed software, right? You licensed modules and methodologies to do inspection and work orders and tooling and all that kind of stuff. But really what you were licensing was the model that made ProCNC successful.
Yeah. That in many ways, that's true. And to be honest, I'm the chief evangelist. I'm very much the face of ProShop, but the guiding principles of how that all worked are really the brainchild of my partner, Kelsey. He was the one that built those first spreadsheets, that had the idea of, if we have this sort of core of data for like quoting a part with manufacturing steps and times and materials and processes, and then that defined the workflow of cloning that and flowing it through to quoting, to part masters, to work orders, to procurement, to invoices, to packing slips, to inspection plans, inspection forms, and then Matt, our partner here and CTO and developer, sole developer for the first, 15 years or so, they're combined just genius for the way to structure this data in a way that is immensely scalable it's really profound. So yeah, our close to 500 clients out there are really running on a system that those guys built and designed. Is kind of the franchise model of ProCNC.
That is so impressive on so many levels. And the question that we usually like to close with on Manufacturing Mavericks, Paul, I'm going to be fascinated to hear this answer because I didn't know a lot of those details of your journey. Going back again, the car magazine, the couch, supportive parents, that say, okay, just switch schools. It's no big deal. Yeah. Go 3,000 miles away. So what? Yeah. Have a good time, Paul. That's that foundation. And then connecting with Kelsey on literally your first day. And then the relationships that unlocks that, we want to build cool cars. Okay. Well, to build cool cars, you need machines. Now that we have these machines, these things have to make money. I mean, just an unbelievable, tale of the American dream, frankly, of, anyone can make it happen anywhere. You guys made it happen. I mean, knocking on doors your own. I can picture an aluminum briefcase, with the foam cut out. And I mean, that had to be that, the first time you did that was probably like, there's no way this is going to work. Right. And then you're like, wow, people find this impressive. I can show it with my parts. I mean, just such an incredible, and I know you said humbling. I can feel your emotion through the interview of, just how meaningful this journey and those relationships and those friendships, not only with your partners, but with your customers and other folks along the way have been. And actually, you know what? Before I jump to the question we usually close with, there's one more I wrote down that I meant to ask you earlier, which is, how did that sports court turn out?
It turned out great. He built it. He's now since moved, but he's shared pictures of it, and it's if he hadn't decided that he wanted a sports court, it's very possible ProShop might not exist as a commercial product.
Wild.
I don't know if we would have had the ideas otherwise, but so many little serendipitous events through my life that have turned into what I could not be. And the part I also have not mentioned, I met my wife, when I came to school very shortly after coming. And so, for sure it was impactful in my life. But I can't imagine doing anything other than what I'm doing. I feel just incredibly grateful and humbled to be invited into these businesses that are incredible and smart people and creative and problem solvers. And yet they still need some better tools and some partnership to make it even better. And because manufacturing, and you may have seen on LinkedIn, I started this ThankaMachinist hashtag.
I love it. I love ThankaMachinist.
Well, when you think about it, and most people don't, of course, out there in the world, literally nothing in the world modern today would exist without machining. Not a single thing. Every human-made product, every single thing is either directly machined or is a mold or is made by a machine that was made of machine parts, whether it's agriculture, whether it's aerospace, whether it's electronics or fabrics or food, anything, it all starts with machining. So even fabricators and mining and oil, and you couldn't have any of those equipment without machinists. So I really think that, and I broaden that to, precision manufacturing. The leaders and owners and founders of those businesses are absolutely the heroes of our economy. You cannot have a strong economy without a strong manufacturing base. And our country lost its way for quite a long time in that regard. And I think it's getting it back slowly. But those shops are the absolute bedrock of everything this country makes. And because you combine that with it being the hardest business in the world, it's so essential to support them. It's so essential to help them thrive. Your software does the exact same thing. You're helping them maximize their spindle hours and get more throughput. And there's nothing that I can imagine that is more rewarding than helping these heroes of our economy. And that creates jobs and that helps support communities. And that's our mission statement, is really, building communities through manufacturing.
I mean, you guys have done, as I said at the outset, an absolutely fantastic job of that. I know that, when we're at events together, people love to seek your counsel and get your perspective. On LinkedIn, some of these threads that you start or chime in on, all of a sudden there's 40 perfect strangers collaborating with each other, to help solve a problem or find material or a tool or help with a job or, really anything that falls in the realm of challenges that everyday manufacturing folks face. So you have certainly, demonstrated and lived up to that mission of building manufacturing community, in thought, word, and deed. And I find that to be so impressive about you, Paul. So, keep it up. I know a lot of people appreciate it in probably in pockets of the world and shops whose names, you might not even know, but I know there's a lot of it out there. The question that we close with on Manufacturing Mavericks is, if you could go back in time and talk to that version of you when that manufacturing torch was first lit, which in this case is the Paul that is sitting on the couch reading a car magazine that I can somehow vividly picture, even though I don't know what you looked like 30 years ago. And I have no idea what kind of couch you had, but I know what couches looked like in the early 90s. So I can make a good guess that it was probably floral print or bizarrely striped.
That's hilarious. That is so good.
If you could sit down next to that Paul, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh gosh, I've been looking at this question for days now. I would tell myself back then, because I didn't realize how essential manufacturing is. I thought, maybe car parts, maybe some of them have a machined hole, or, I didn't even know what machining was back then, but that manufacturing is so foundationally critical to our world. And that I was going to, basically just, not that I needed encouragement. Clearly when I see something that I want to go after, I just do it, but that it was the right choice. And getting involved in this industry and helping be an advocate and a supporter and, of these companies that make the fabric of our economy, I would have just cheered myself on and said, yes, you don't realize how important this is going to turn in, this is going to end up being. I learned some hard lessons along the way about people, about systems, about, being a leader. I definitely made plenty of mistakes early on, but I would have said that's okay to learn those mistakes, just, or to make the mistakes, learn from them. Don't be too hard on yourself. Have confidence that you're doing the right thing and just go for it.
Love it. You never know what that first step out the door towards Washington is going to do for you, who you're going to meet, and how that's going to change your life. Paul, I have so enjoyed this interview. You are 500% one of the mavericks of manufacturing. So honored to be able to spend this time with you on this episode and learn about that journey. Really looking forward to when this one gets released. I know that there are many, many folks that are going to love to hear about that journey and, the twists and turns and the fate and the inspiration of the journey that you've gone on. So thank you so much, Paul, for your time. Fantastic speaking with you and looking forward to our continued partnership and friendship. It's been a pleasure getting to know you the last several years.
You too, Greg. Thank you so much. You're such an adept, great interviewer. This has been easy and fun. And likewise, appreciate what you guys are doing for the industry and the partnership we have.
Thank you for listening to Manufacturing Mavericks. If you'd like to learn more, listen to past episodes, or nominate a future Maverick to be on our show, visit mfgmavericks.com. And don't forget to subscribe to and rate this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app.